Canada is set to revoke the spanking law, making it illegal for parents or teachers to use physical force, including spanking, on any child. Today on Context, we ask, is spanking okay? And what does the healthy discipline of a child look like? Lawyer Mary Birdsell is the Executive Director of Justice for Children and Youth. Please welcome Mary Birdsell to Context. Hi, Mary. Thank you. Thank you. I am glad I'm too old to have little kids because this is kind of a controversial opportunity facing Canada. So if Section 43 of the Criminal Code is repealed, which it will be, according to our Prime Minister, what could criminally happen to parents who still spank their young children?
Well, that's a good question. What the repeal of Section 43 would do is take a defense that's in the criminal code for hitting out of the criminal code. And so there would be no criminal code specified defense for parents who were hitting their children.
And the way it reads now is you're allowed to use reasonable force.
Parents, people standing in the place of parents and school teachers, are allowed to use reasonable force for the purposes of discipline. But the courts have said that no implements, so you're not allowed to use things to hit children.
Because we have had court cases of this already, of parents being taken for their discipline methods to court.
There are those cases, and there are many cases where parents have used some kind of physical force or corporal punishment or hitting to discipline their children, and some parents are found to be guilty after having a trial, and many parents are also found to be not guilty, in spite of what the Supreme Court of Canada has done to try and sort of limit, because before the Supreme Court of Canada said anything, there was no limit on the kind of, it's supposed to be reasonable, but then what a judge thinks is reasonable could change from situation to situation.
And you are the organization where if kids need a lawyer, they go to you. They go to your agency.
Yes.
Have you had them come over the issue of discipline?
Absolutely. I mean, we have lots of different clients who in different circumstances come to us who have histories of discipline and abuse in their families. We don't often have children come to us, and never in the 20 years that I've been there have I known of a child who's come to us to say, I got spanked, I'd like to do something. That's not how it happens. And if I can get back to your other question about what would it mean for parents, the message that we hope people understand is that the law prohibits us from hitting one another. Assault is an offense.
Assault.
And so there are no people that you are allowed to hit. You're not allowed to hit people. I'm not allowed to hit people. But there's this defense currently for hitting children. And to us, from the rights of the child point of view, it just makes no sense that we're allowed to hit the people who are most dependent on us for care and nurturing and
remember
correction.
These Ann Landers days, all of us who were raised with that school, it was like pat, pat, even, 2 swipes to the bottom,
a swift
under 5. No, you're saying that's
Well,
assault.
I think the interesting questions are things about what that actually teaches children. Again, coming back to your question about what would happen and what can the police do. What I would say to people who are worried, oh my goodness, does this mean I'm going to get charged by the police if I slap my child once on the bottom? And the answer is probably not. I mean, the police...
Probably not.
Well, every day the police make decisions, they use their discretion about whether something is important enough, serious enough to lead to a criminal justice system intervention. So, technically, if I'm walking down the hallway quickly and I push someone out of the way, that's an assault. But the police aren't going to lay a charge for that. It's much too minor to warrant criminal justice system involvement. So I think that when we start looking at it from that point of view, oh my goodness, are people going to get charged? We've lost sight of children being hit and harmed.
Thank you. Mary Birdsell is Executive Director of Justice for Children and Youth. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
She's a best-selling author and resident expert on national outlets like The Marilyn Dennis Show, CTV News Channel, and HuffPost Parents, helping parents better understand parent-child dynamics. Allison Shaffer, please welcome to Context. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, let's start here. Section 43 of the Criminal Code of Canada allows parents to spank their children. And if it is repealed, as PM Trudeau has said it will be, it would make spanking illegal in Canada. So what are your thoughts on this proposed ban?
Well, I say hallelujah to repealing Bill 43. That was introduced to the Criminal Code in Canada in 1892, and we never looked at that again until 2004, at which time we thought we were going to eliminate it and make corporal punishment illegal, but we didn't. We just narrowed some of the definitions. You have to know there's almost 50 other countries around the world where corporal punishment is illegal. And if you think of Canada as being a modern democracy, an industrialized nation that is educated, we know better. It is our time to step up and join the other nations who know better.
Let me ask you this. Are there any short-term or long-term consequences that directly affect a child when they are spanked?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what the research shows, that when you are about to be struck, really you're putting the child into a state of fear. And when you are in a state of fear, your mind is not able to be a good learner. And really what discipline is about learning. And we know in the long run what happens with kids who have been spanked or any form of corporal punishment has been used against them, that it actually interferes with the learning, but it also hurts the relationship and that attachment bond between parent and the child and their caregiver. It also hurts their self-esteem. That the long-lasting effects of this are certainly measurable. We really want to teach kids how to be good problem solvers and how to improve their conduct, but kids who have been spanked don't learn those skills. And in fact, we see that they have a much more higher likelihood of using aggression as their solution to a problem. So these kids are much more likely to bully and to get into other relationship problems.
Allison, let me ask you this. Were you ever spanked growing up, in terms of there's a personal connection to this?
I never was. I'm actually the third generation in my family to be a parent educator. So I very luckily had parents who were educated on alternative means for disciplining without the use of either punishment or rewards.
Help us define, because it could be somewhat of a fluid kind of experience. Help us define what healthy child-parent discipline is.
Well, I like to go back to that word discipline and think of it as the root word. It's right. It's about disciple, to teach. We're educating children about the laws of social living so that they can function amongst a group of other people. So the parent in that role is they are still in a leadership role. They are the boss of the family, but they do not need to be bossy in how they implement their discipline. That we have to set firm limits and boundaries, but we need to enforce them in ways that are friendly. So figuring out how to be both firm and friendly simultaneously as a parent is sort of tricky, because many of us understand firm, that's the old corporal punishment model, and people that have thrown that away have ended up being incredibly permissive. They're good at being friendly, but they're not good disciplinarians. So it's striking up that balance between the two to teach our kids about social conduct.
Your book, Ain't Misbehaving, Tactics for, it's a great title, for tantrums, meltdowns, bedtime blues, and other perfectly normal kid behaviors. you named like the most common parenting issues that arise from toddlers and tweens. I want to start with toddlers. What are some of these issues and how, these challenges that come up, and how can people actually deal with them? Let's start with toddlers. Yeah.
Well, that's usually where discipline starts. I tell most parents, by the time your kids are 16 or 18 months old, you should probably be reading books on discipline or signing up for a parent education class. And I would say probably the most common problem is that parents have the expectation that their toddlers should listen, and they don't. So if you say, get off the couch, you're not supposed to jump on the couch, parents get incredibly disappointed that their child doesn't just scurry off the couch because they've been told not to. In fact, the way kids find limits and boundaries is by testing them. So they will not just listen to your words. Instead, we have to do something. We have to dig into our discipline toolbox and take action. So a simple tool for young kids is logical consequences. So this is the idea of you're free to choose for yourself, but every choice has an outcome. So I can say, it's not okay to jump on the couch. Can you get yourself off the couch, or do I need to help you? And when they keep jumping, I say, looks like I need to help you. I take them off the couch. If they run right back, I can say, can you be in this room without jumping on the couch, or do I need to put up a baby gate? But in each case, I'm offering them a choice, and I'm following through with the consequence of their choices. But I'm not just blindly expecting the child to listen to me. That's a forget that idea. It's not going to happen. You have to do something. They're experiential learners.
So how does the dialogue, the discussion, the approach change when dealing with tweens?
So when kids are little, we really act in the role of being the educator to our kids. So it's boots need to go on the mat, coats need to go on the hooks, but we need to shift that around once we start hitting into the tween years, because kids don't want to know what we know anymore. They would like us to understand what they know. So we have to switch our role to being much more of a coach and to help them facilitate their own learning. So I want to then ask a lot of curiosity questions. So why do you think it is that people think it's cool to smoke? And what would you do if somebody was at school and they were picking on somebody and there was no teachers around? And I'm trying to get them to use that big growing mind to process information. And you'd be amazed at how much kids will come to fair and justice type answers. So there is definitely a shift. I like to use collaborative problem solving with kids. So people aren't getting to the dinner table on time. How can we do that better? People seem to be late for school a lot in the morning and we're yelling. How could we do that better? So co-joint problem solving is a definite skill for tweens.
Allison, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for covering an important topic.
That was Allison Shaffer, best-selling author and parenting expert here on Context.
Coming up, are we witnessing the collapse of parenting? Some say yes. That's next.
Dr. Leonard Sachs is a renowned physician, psychologist, and author. His book, The Collapse of Parenting, tells us we have some homework to do on learning how to discipline children. Thank you so much for being with us, Doctor.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, Dr. Sachs, let's start here. What do you mean by the term, the collapse of parenting?
Well, what it looks like, give you some examples from my practice. Mom brings her 6-year-old daughter in, and daughter has a fever and a sore throat. And I say, okay, let's do a strep test. But before I can do the strep test, mom says, is it okay if the doctor looks at your throat and does a test? And the daughter looks at mom and thinks this over and then says, no, I don't think so. And what should have been a 10-second procedure becomes a 5-minute requiring an assistant to restrain the child. There are some domains where it's okay to let kids decide, but when a child has a fever and a sore throat, the child does not get a vote. And there are many such domains in the life of a child or teenager. Does a teenager get to take their cell phone to bed with them? The teenager should not be consulted on this point. It's not reasonable to put that burden in the lap of a teenager. There are many domains where the child should not make the decision, where the parent has to make that decision.
Over the last 30 years, it's been said, and you've actually said that there's been a major shift in American culture in the parent-child dynamic in terms of a transfer of authority from parents to children. What does healthy parent-child dynamics look like, especially through the lens of discipline?
Well, I'm not saying that kids should not have decision-making. In appropriate domains, I think it's fine for kids to make decisions. You've got 2 birthday invitations to Jason's party and to Jared's party, same time, same date. Which one would you like to attend? I think it's very reasonable for kids to make that call. But in big domains, what school to attend for parents who choose a school, whether to take a device to bed, whether to be looking at a screen in the car, whether to consent to a strep test at the doctor's office when you're sick. These are domains where a generation ago, there would have been no question that the parent makes the call.
Talk to us about the danger you speak of as parents begin to treat their children as adults, the non-confrontational approach of parents versus perhaps the confrontational. Take us down that a little.
In the book, I talk about what is the job of the parent. Look, the human species is remarkable in the length of childhood. A horse is fully mature at 4 years of age. A 4-year-old child has only begun. and is nowhere near mature adulthood. Why is that? Why is childhood so long in our species compared to other species, including larger animals like horses? Well, researchers have studied this at great length, and their conclusion is that childhood takes as long as it does because it takes many years for parents to teach human culture to children. That's the job of the parent, to instruct your child, to teach right and wrong, to keep them safe. That's what good parenting consists of. And parents who step back from their authority are not doing their job. To teach right and wrong requires that you teach from a position of authority. Otherwise, your child may say, well, that's your opinion. That's not Justin Bieber's opinion. So, to heck with your opinion. And many Anglophone parents are setting their kids adrift in North American popular culture, which means the culture of Justin Bieber, Miley Cyrus, Kim Kardashian. This is not a healthy culture, and this is not a guess or sermon. We've got a lot of research on this point, which I share in the book.
How is the approach of parenting, especially through the lens of discipline, approached in your home with your daughter?
Well, no, I certainly try to practice what I preach. I've certainly never spanked my child, and no one has ever spanked my child. And we put family first. There are no screens at the dinner table. We spend time together in the family room with no screens off, my wife and I and my child's grandparents. We try to practice what we preach, absolutely.
Dr. Leonard Sachs, author of The Collapse of Parenting, psychologist and physician, thank you so much for joining us.
Very good. Thanks again.
Well, we just couldn't let this look at parenting go without hearing from people where I raised our young children, a Bible Belt town in Canada, Steinbach, Manitoba. And to me, it's a good, common sense family town. So for the next voice on disciplining children, Steinbach school principal is joining us along with his son, Eldon and Ryan Dueck. Welcome to Context.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Lauren.
Okay, you knew I'd come back to find you. No relation. We should maybe tell our viewers that, no relation. But Ryan, I want to start with you because you work as a supervisor for helping, deal with kids who are in crisis and finding them just a better route. What do you see that makes you think there is a crisis in authority for kids?
Well, I see a lot. I think I see a lot of what everyone's seeing. I think the unique privilege I have is because I'm so close to the crisis. I get to see it from a really sharp angle, and we talk about high-risk behaviors. We're seeing drug usage, alcoholism, gang involvement, violence, and then some of the more typical things we're seeing from a lot of kids. Opposition and defiance to authority, and so I see that kind of close hand in the trenches, and. When I look at it from my perspective, which is, someone who gets to go as a liaison between the school system with teachers and principals, I work with parole officers, social workers, and obviously with parents and families in their homes. And what I see, frankly, is a lot of kids that are in survival mode. They're just trying to survive. And as I track down, my influence and my conversation with kids, it seems to always come back to the patterns that develop in the home with the authority in the home or lack of authority. And that plays out over, the rest of the levels of that child's involvement, that kid's involvement at school and life. And so it absolutely is a crisis, and there's some scary cycles being developed, and I just see it because of my inside perspective as really starting with the family unit.
You have a whole little army of adults that descend upon children, government-paid adults, and it's not working, right? Like the discipline from the outside is too late.
It seems very counterproductive, and it seems, like you just said, too late and too slow on the draw.
Okay, Eldon, father and son here. You've been in the school system for over 30 years as a principal. What do you wish we understood about disciplining children?
I just think that the paramount issue here is that not just with students, but with our own children, that we take the time and find the time to actually meet with our children and talk to them, get to know them. And I think the big key for me is that the relationship factor is the most important aspect of developing and securing some kind of a formal kind of a discipline process. You just can't limit it to one thing. But I think the relationship aspect is the foundation for anything good that can come out of discipline situations.
You are from a family of 11 in very conservative, I called it Bible Belt Canada. Do you support spanking children?
You know, I would have to say that I came from a family where spanking was not a real discipline aspect. It was just not really a consideration. And so when we had kids of our own, we did not look to that as any kind of a main source of discipline with our two boys. And for whatever amount of discipline I did with a small amount of spanking, I would gladly take back. And growing up in a home with 10 siblings, you know, it was not the way we were raised. I think being the youngest, though, some of my older siblings may have experienced things a little differently than I did, but I know that by the time I came along, there was a much more of a tone of conversation and holding me close to my parents as opposed to separating me from them through severe kinds of discipline.
Ryan, how did your dad discipline you guys as boys?
Well, he's honest to his word. It's funny. And I've read this many times when it talks about the idea of spanking or corporal punishment. It talks about how the worst part about being struck is not necessarily the sting of the blow; it's the sting of the humiliation. And one thing that I can vouch for is I don't remember any humiliation. I don't remember being struck as well, but I don't remember any humiliation. And discipline was always, it seemed just to me. It seemed in the context of conversation, and that's a gift that I'm so grateful for that I think a lot of kids don't receive, is the gift of conversation around discipline, around expectations, and I'm really blessed by that. I know it's not always the most common thing in our world today.
Eldon, I know you're a public school principal, but you also have some thoughts on what you think is God's heart for disciplining our children. What do you wish we could understand about that?
Well, I have to go back to relationships. I have to go back to accountability. And I have to talk about restorative justice or restitution. And I think when you mix any of those or all of them together, you get a really good recipe for being able to guide students and or your own children. And I think that angle of being able to really go deep with your children and or your students and then find ways to make things right. And when I'm talking about making things right, I don't mean making things right by just saying sorry. I mean, if you break your brother's toy, then you take money out of your piggy bank and you go to the store with your mom or your dad and you replace that item with your own money, whether it's earned or given as an allowance. And I think that any time parents take the time to do that and discuss it and see it through to the end, that is not time wasted. It is time well spent, and it has a great, great result.
Well, thank you to both of you. Ryan Dueck, supervisor with Youth for Christ, a program providing recreational programming for kids, and Steinbach, Manitoba school principal Eldon Dueck. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It was great.
Sheldon, over to you now with a question for our viewers at home.
Thank you so much, Lorna. My question for you at home is this. Do you think spanking is right or wrong, and why? Some of our audience have already begun weighing in on this. David McKenzie, he wrote, as a child, I was spanked 3 times. One was for lying to my mother, one was for slapping my sister across the face, and another was for using passive resistance in trying to manipulate my father. Now, the last one took the longest to figure out, however. The pain seared the memory into my cerebral cortex so that I actually remember the lesson. This is not abuse, it is wisdom, but it must be used not in anger, but always sparingly and for a point. Now listen, we want to know what you think about this. Join Michael, join the others, get in on this. You can always reach us here at Context by any of the means you see on the screen. Call us at 1-800-215-4913. You can also write to us on the email at comments@contextwithlorna.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Context TV.
Coming up, I share some closing thoughts on the Bible and what it says about spanking your kids. There are some people people watching our Look into Child Discipline who will scold us and say the Bible supports corporal punishment for children. I was raised under that belief. Most baby boomers in our country were. If God hadn't told you to spank your kids, Ann Landers certainly had. Here's one of 2 Bible proverbs on spanking. Don't fail to correct your children. They won't die if you spank them. Physical discipline may well save them from death. So, when a Canadian Prime Minister says that the law that allows spanking children is going to be abolished, many in the faith world are on guard. To truly follow the meaning and spirit of the Bible does not, though, mean one follows every letter to its ancient law. In the ancient world, there was no cap on corporal punishment, and Proverbs were a gentle redemption to harsh times. So what is redemptive discipline for kids in 2016? Biblical love for our kids is pro-discipline, anti-violent, and it's not easy. Parents need so much self-control and self-sacrifice to do the job well. I can't imagine doing it without God's way of wisdom fueling our spirits. And a little help on that, write to us for a chance to win one of 5 free books we're giving away on corporal punishment in the Bible, a redemptive movement hermeneutic for troubling texts. It's by William Webb from Tyndale University, my alma mater, and will just help us all think well on this. Thanks for going beyond the headlines for us on an important look into parenting today. And for all of us at Context, I'm Eldon Dueck. Thank you for watching, and join us next week as we explore life beyond the headlines.